welcome to the Top Order podcast. It's World Cup fever coming to an end with the T20 World Cup champions India being crowned, King Kohli and Rohit going out with a bang. We'll talk about all the action in the T20 World Cup final from Bridgetown, Barbados, all coming up on the Top Order podcast. Stay tuned. So, boys, a fantastic atmosphere in the ground in Bridgetown for the T20 World Cup final. It's going to be easy to talk about choking narratives throughout the course of this segment and this podcast, but we are here to review the final. It's been by and large, a fantastic tournament, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit more in our T20 World Cup wrap-up, which will follow when we're all in the studio next week. But we are here to review the final, which started with India winning the toss and batting first. Virat Kohli shining on the big stage, but still some question marks around strike rates for him as we probably went into the break in innings. And then, look, I guess a situation where South Africa got themselves in a very, very good position, needing 26 off 24 balls to take home their first ICC men's trophy, but couldn't get over the line thanks to some brilliance really from the Indian seamers and a bit of sensational fielding, which is surely up for the turquoise cap as well. Stu, I'll come to you first. Your impressions on the game. I know you got up with your young boys to watch the game this morning. Not quite at its appointed start time, but you were probably watching it on catch up whilst it was still going on, weren't you?
Yeah, yep. So it starts here at 2:30 in the morning, New Zealand time. So didn't quite make it up for that, but it was a bit of a restless sleep in my house. So I sort of thought, what the heck, I'll get up and start watching straight away. And about 5:30 in the morning here, New Zealand time, switched it on. Was starting with the ball by ball. And honestly, I'm so delighted that I did because, I think you and I were just talking beforehand. What a brilliant game. Those semi-finals were duds for the neutral fans. Really, New Zealand's been out of this tournament for a long time. And, when you're starting to follow it as a neutral suddenly, you just want close games and entertaining cricket. But this game absolutely just had everything. I loved it. I was sitting there with my boys, three boys, and just kind of, I don't know, every time I would say something like, oh, South Africa's getting on top here, something, India would take a wicket, or, I'd say, look, this guy, Jasprit Bumrah, he's the best bowler in the world. He'd run in, clean up Marco Jansen. It just had everything. And, I think we could go through this game basically from the start to the finish with all the different points and really, really dive deep on it. We could be here for hours because it was so fun watching that game. And, brilliant stuff. And, Baldy, I think you talked before about, Binksy actually mentioned in the last show that Virat Kohli, he thought Virat Kohli was going to come good in the final. It did that. It did exactly that. And Baldy, you were talking before about that first over. Virat Kohli just set the scene with the way he started.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you used to, we had the whole family affair this Sunday morning watching the cricket. So my partner and our two kids on the couch Sunday morning watching the game. And Nikki commented early doors. Sorry, my partner commented early doors. Her name shall remain anonymous for listeners and viewers. That Jonathan Rhys-Mears had given Kohli a bit of an easy start. The first one was an offside half volley. Then it was a leg stump half volley. Then he gets a half volley to hit down the ground. And by the time the first over's done, Kohli's 14 off 5. But then crawled his way to 50 off 48. So, South Africa did peg it back after that early start to Virat Kohli. They kind of settled the nerves a little bit. They got a freebie from Sharma. They got a leading edge from Pant off the top to give them a couple of wickets early in the power play. And, after 6 overs, it was kind of even Stevens and remained that way throughout. But because that partnership between Axar and Kohli just built a little bit. So as we talked about in the Australia game, that 4 to 12 over mark, India built partnerships and were able to go big at the end to get themselves to 170, and that proved enough on the day.
Binksy, what do you make of... I just want to say quickly the strike rate thing on Kohli. I absolutely think that was the perfect innings, if you ask me. Or perfect in the sense that if he had kept going to the end, which he almost did, he would have got 100, I think, even though, he didn't quite get there in the end. I do think, basically they came to that partnership and it was fairly clear early on, after they'd lost those 3 wickets, Kohli had decided, okay, it's my job now to kind of revert back to what I've done so many different times over the years, and I'm going to navigate India to a score that I think we can defend. And I was going to throw it to you, Binksy, in that, what did you make of Axar coming in at 5? Because, in the aftermath, it looks like a really fantastic decision. But at the time, I was kind of thinking, is this going to slow them down too much by not bringing some of their hitters out a little bit earlier on?
Yeah, so I think first thing I better just cover off is I think in terms of Jonathan Rhys-Myers, he's an Irish actor from, I think he was in, he's played Elvis Presley for sure, and I think he was in Bend It Like Beckham, if I remember correctly.
He was the football coach.
But looks like Marco Jansen, for those of you trying to Google that in the background. I think in terms of, your question around strike rates and around Axar, I think they obviously wanted, with the very, very strong breeze blowing across the ground, particularly when the spinners were on, they wanted to have the opportunity for someone to always be hitting down breeze. So I guess to an extent, that might be why, why Axar came in at that particular point in the innings. I think in terms of Virat Kohli, you're dead right. I kind of thought about it just before he got out, actually. And I thought, well, if he gets a couple of boundaries in this over and then, maybe 20 in the final over, he's going to be pretty close to, 100 off 60, which is realistically, if you get that kind of score on 90 off 60, you've definitely done your job. But I think from an Indian perspective, they just must be really, really pleased that pretty much what their game plan just worked throughout the course of the game. I think the only amendments that they might have made to that is they might have expected Rohit to get going in the power play. It was actually Kohli that probably got going a little bit in the power play. And then they had the icing on the cake, those kind of innings from Axar and Shivam Dubé down at the end of the innings. And then the only deviation I think they had in their bowling was that Bumrah bowled 16 and 18 rather than 17 and 19. That was probably the only thing that wasn't on the whiteboard leading into this game. So I think for me, we've just got to give a massive amount of credit to the way India have gone unbeaten throughout this tournament. And really, I guess they would have known in the dressing room that this was going to be farewell to 2 absolute box office marquee, close to Rushmore level players for India, and to have them go out on such a high, I think. And you saw Rohit at the end of the game, literally on the floor, almost in tears, sort of banging the ground with his fist. How much it meant to him. So I think we'll talk about South Africa, of course we will. But the first thing I just want to say is what a great game and what a great blueprint that India executed in this final.
Baldy, when we got to the end of the India innings, because I think Binksy's covered it off nicely with Dubé's knock there. I think that was very, very important there. 27 off 16, kind of getting them to 176. Did you think that where were you at? Was that I said to my boys who have no sense of what's par and what's not. I said I reckon that they'll win from here, but that it's slightly under par was my initial reaction to that score.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought they were maybe 9 under par. 185 was the mark that I had in my head. Even though at the halfway point, 160 looked like it would be a reasonable score for India. I think they were halfway. They were about 75 for 3, I think, and 100 from there was a really, really good get. The last 10 overs, particularly as South Africa started to bring their length back. And you saw as soon as Rabada came on, the guys that were able to bowl in those middle overs pulled their length back. They put a bit of work on the ball and they made it hard for Virat and for Axar. Virat didn't take a boundary from the 4th over through to the 17th over. They had to work really, really hard to build that partnership. And that's what really impressed me about Axar on a big occasion when the batting was not at its hardest, but the situation was at its most difficult. He was outstanding. And I think we've seen the emergence of Axar being the premier all-rounder in this Indian squad over the course of this tournament, because He's supplanted Ravi Jadeja in my mind in terms of being the number one for India as far as this tournament has gone. That's for certain. But yeah, I thought they were 9 or 10 under par, and South Africa were in for a real chance. But you just always knew that Jasprit Bumrah was going to bowl 4 really tight overs, and effectively, South Africa needed to get their 160 or 155 or whatever it is off the other 16 overs of the chase.
Stu, I'll come to you. You and I were talking about this before we came on air. Where did you sort of pinpoint South Africa faltering? I guess they got very, very close. We talked about the fact that I think, if my maths is right, they only got 58 runs off the 11 overs of seam up bowling. So obviously the remainder pretty much coming off the spinners. But any moments that they would have a mulligan on? Do you think from either their batting or their bowling?
I actually think I'm going to flip that question around and say what I think that they did really well in this game. I actually think that Markram initially did a really nice job of mixing those bowlers around in terms of his bowling attack, and as we said, probably gets India slightly under par there. And then when it comes around to Bumrah, Bumrah comes on, cleans up Hendricks with that absolute ripper, hits the top of off. Markram edges a wideish one from Arshdeep, and they're 12 for 2. And at that point, you're sort of thinking, okay, like spinners are going to come on here, and it's going to be really, really hard for South Africa to get back into that game. But I think what they did fantastically well is that they targeted those spinners. They said, look, we are not just going to let you guys settle. Axar comes on in the 5th over. I think they took about 10 off him. Kuldeep comes on in the 6th over. They take another 10 off him. And I think actually Rohit started to get stuck in a little pattern of thinking, I only really do have 2 seamers and Hardik. I've got to get something out of these spinners, and I need them to pick up a wicket. They've been so reliable for me. Axar and Kuldeep just grabbing wickets. But yeah, those South African batters just did not let them settle. And the way that they went about things, maybe in hindsight, like you said, getting only 58 off the seamers of 11 overs of seam is not going to be good enough. It wasn't good enough in the end. But I think the way that they targeted those spinners really set them up for success. And then, I don't know, we'll probably come into the final stages of the game shortly. But yeah, Baldy, what did you sort of like about Stubbs and Quinton de Kock? Because yeah, I mean, Kock, and we'll get on to Klaasen after that maybe, because I think that Stubbs de Kock partnership really set them up for a platform for those guys to then kick on.
Yeah, absolutely they did. I had it in my ball-by-ball notes as I was watching the final that South Africa basically won that from that moment where Markram nicked off. South Africa won the next 6 overs and were well in front of the asking rate at the halfway mark. They hit boundaries in every over, so they kept the scoreboard ticking along. They didn't absorb too many dot balls. There were only half a dozen dot balls in that period of time. And until Stubbs decided he was going to become cricketing Wayne Brady and improvise all over the place against Axar, South Africa didn't have to change much. They had the right pattern, but Stubbs got it in his head that he had to move about all over the crease and put Axar off his length. But Axar did a good job of staying stump to stump. That was the key for the spinners in this game, was to not give width. And from that point, sort of, it was in the balance up until Klaasen decided to do his thing, and he really targeted the spinners, which I thought, as you said, South Africa did a really good job of in this match. Big tick for them.
Yeah, look, Lip, I'll just probably pick up on that point. I think Stubbs, I think, would probably want to have another crack at his shot. It was an unnecessary improvisation at that point in the game. They were well on top, I think. And I think another couple of overs of just standing there and hitting the ball cleanly, and that have been even further ahead of the rate at the halfway stage. I also think, again, probably coming back to what India did well, I thought we'll talk about Klaasen in a sec, but I think that they kept David Miller relatively quiet, right? So striking at about 120. I think they hid the ball really, really well to him. And then ultimately, interesting to get your thoughts, but I thought I'm going to give Panja Hardik the benefit of the doubt that first seed to Heinrich Klaasen was planned. It was a really wide delivery because he does set himself up with that really, really good base. And if you just miss your length, he's got the ability to, I don't know how, but get underneath the ball and hit you straight down the ground. So, I thought that was really, really well executed from Hardik Pandya as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, Klaasen was going to get them home, wasn't he? I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about that. He got them down to 30 off 30. He just sort of took off, didn't he? Hit that straight six off Jadeja, that back foot one over cover off Kuldeep, and then that over from Axar where he just went, he hit a couple of boundaries, then he went 6, 4, and 24 off that over. And I think that at that point, we're all kind of sitting there probably, I'm sure, just going, okay, like they've done this. South Africa's going to get home here. And I think, it's one of those innings, right? It's an absolutely brilliant innings. And I don't want to take anything away from that. But I'm sure that out of all of those players, I reckon he might be hurting the most because he's sitting there probably thinking, I should have got them home. Like I had won us that game. And if I could have just stayed in for one more over, 2 more overs, we would have won that game. And, I feel for him because it was a truly fantastic effort. But, then the Indian seamers came on, as you touched on, Binksy, the way that they bowled throughout this, and the game just changed.
Do you think, the question for both of you, do you think we sit here as pure cricketing purists, right? We like Test cricket. We have played in an era where you take the game deep, and when you've got the ability to just make sure you win the game, you do it in singles at times, or certainly take the game as far as it goes. Does this go into the modern way of playing though? Because I don't think that these guys see that. They're just like, well, let's get there as quickly as we can. Why would I stop? Why would I get off this roller coaster that I'm on? What are the thought processes? Do you think it ever goes through their mind to go, we're down to a runner ball, we'll do this easily now?
That wasn't really the point I was making, because I agree with you. I don't think they do. I think I'm really meant like he just needed, if he'd have gone 1 more over, 2 more overs with the way he was batting, that he would have got them home, because I completely agree. I think he was thinking, we're on top now. Like, we're going to put the foot down here and we're going to, put the gas on and we're going to win this game with 3 overs to go. And that's what he did. That Axar over, that's the kind of, sometimes you see it in the 18th or the 19th, right? People go, okay, like we've got it to, 8 and over, 10 and over or something. It's time to go now, because I'm sure, I think if there's anything they were probably thinking Bumrah's got 2 left.
Yeah.
We want to get in front because we know that this guy, no matter what, he's going to be incredibly hard to get through. And I think that, as I said before, I think Rohit probably didn't, you said it as well. I don't think Rohit probably wanted to bowl him the 16th, but after that over, he had to. It was like, I've got 1 card left, and it's Jasprit Bumrah, and he came on, and Baldy, boy oh boy, did he change the game once he was there.
Well, he absolutely did. I think the other thing that changed the game was that little mini break where Rishabh Pant was getting treatment for a troublesome knee. That 2-minute delay, I think, really changed the mindset of those South African batters. They got themselves to 30 off 30, right? So they were absolutely in the box seat. They had 6 wickets in hand. They had the right batters at the crease. Those batters were set. They knew that they had 2 overs of Bumrah, but they knew also that they had an over from Arshdeep and 2 overs of Hardik or 3 overs of Jadeja, that they had an opportunity to go, okay, well, that's 22 off that 18. We need 8 off Bumrah's 12. Game done. So I'm sure that was their plan, because they absorbed that Bumrah over effectively. The 16th over, that 4 off that, 3 dot balls, they went, okay, we're fine now. Then the break came, and I reckon it's the break that got in their heads, because you could just see Klaasen just waved at that wide one. It was perfectly executed from Hardik, and we really should give Hardik a lot of credit in this game. He got the 2 big key wickets. He got Miller and he got Klaasen. As much as we're going to praise Bumrah at the back end of this game, because he was incredible and he's the best bowler in the world, and combined with Arshdeep, who's had a fantastic tournament, took a wicket at the top, and bowled really, really well in this game. His 18th or 19th over only went for 4. He's been fantastic, but it was Hardik that broke this game open. And I'm sure you're right, Adam. I'm sure he dangled the wide one, hoping that Klaasen would flay at it and nick off. And he did. and it was an absolute turning point in this game. And you're right, he's the guy, Klaasen, who's going to be hurting the most, because he got South Africa to within touching distance, and then all of those memories will come flooding back to him of being so close and yet so far.
I want you to take me through, you just said Hardicks dangled the carrot out there with the first ball to Klaasen in that over. Take me through the last over. I could see him. I was trying to use it as a teaching moment for my boys. I could see him at the top of his mark, and he was taking super big, deep breaths before every single ball that he bowled. And I was like, you've got to calm down, get yourself back in the space, and then he bowls a fully. David Miller hits it out of the, looks like it's going out of the ground. Take me through Sky's catch, because that was just phenomenal.
Yeah, look, the catch was just look, it was out of this world, and look, I'm really glad that Raj isn't here tonight, because I can actually award the turquoise cap for the most stylish six to a play that really stopped a six, and stopped probably a moment where that would have been very, very squeaky bum then, and I think you would have expected that they'd have got over the line from that particular point. I think, yeah, annoyingly, the first televised view of it was a little bit impeded by, I don't know whether it was that they didn't get the director on the right camera angle. And look, that's not a criticism. It happened pretty quickly, but you didn't quite see the brilliance of it until the replays came. But look, you had the best man on commentary for it in Smithy, who, called it absolutely superbly. But I think that these guys practice it so much, but it almost seemed as if he was in slow-mo, how calm he was, to kind of take the catch, knew exactly where his feet were. Look, an absolutely sensational catch. We've seen a number like that. I'd say for the moment in the game and the difficulty of the catch, it's got to go pretty much up there. I think we've seen better ones, but definitely not in a World Cup final, and definitely not when a side needs 12 or 15 to win. So yeah, look, absolutely sensational. I'm really glad you asked me about the catch. I thought you were asking me about how Asima prepared to bowl the last over of a white ball game. He certainly looked like he was sucking in the air. And I want to come to Baldy as well. He mentions the Rishabh Pant injury or treatment. Was that a little bit of a Gulbadin? Was he slow? Was he slowing the game down deliberately there? Do you think? Because if he was, I think it was a perfect time to do it. Because as a batting side, if you're on with a bit of momentum, you just want to carry on. You don't want the sting in the air taken out of the game by a little break. So if that was deliberate from Pant, I thought that was brilliant from him.
I don't think it was brilliant, because if he was going to do it, he would have done it the over before, after South Africa had taken 23, and it would have been effectively like a fielding timeout. I was looking at it going, that's. But then I was like, hang on, this dude was in like a massive car crash 18 months ago. I'm sure there are niggling, lingering things that are going on with his body that just require sometimes a little bit of treatment. But it came perfectly at the right time for India. They were able to take the momentum back with the Bumrah over and then slow things right down. I honestly think it got in the heads of those two South African batters, because they had so much time to think about how they were going to get those remaining 26 runs off 24 balls, that I think they chased that total 9 or 10 times in their own mind in that 3-minute break. And they weren't able to, as Hardick did so well, recompose themselves and find their best option and find that clarity of decision-making. Because you're right, Adam, Hardick's decision-making at the death was absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on.
Lippy, can I ask you a question? And this is about the captaincy, probably in this game, obviously, but more so, I think, or equally throughout the course of the tournament. Aiden Markram has captained the South Africa side to a number of close victories, which hasn't historically been something that they've been very good at. And then, Rohit, I think, has captained tremendously in this game, has got some really, really key decisions correct, particularly probably choosing when to bring Bumrah, Bumrah back, taking time to calm the seamers down and make South Africa wait a little bit. But yeah, just a word, I guess, on the captaincy we've seen in this game.
Yeah, I think you've said it there. I think both of them have done a fantastic job. I think there's obviously, when someone is the captain of a side and they go this far in a tournament, there are decisions that they make. I think I mentioned a couple of episodes ago about Markram sort of bowling himself in the power play. I didn't think that was the greatest move at times, but it's every time recently, every time he's done that, it's actually paid off. I thought he did a really nice job of they got that wicket early on today. He brought Rabada straight on, tried to get another one. I thought that was really key. And the way he mixed up his bowlers throughout, and even the planning, I think you said it earlier about how they found that length really early on. They found the length, those seamers, and they started up, maybe it was after drinks. It seemed like they'd figured out, okay, we've got to bowl a bit shorter. And when they did, it was much harder for the Indian players to hit boundaries. So, I think he's done a fantastic job. And, same with Rohit. I think he's been absolutely super from a leadership point. We talked a lot about his intent. It obviously didn't come off so much in this game. But the way he sets the tone at the start of that innings, I thought myself today when those spinners were bowling that he'd left them on too long. And then Axar got that wicket of Stubbs. And suddenly you thought, okay, he's left them on to get this wicket. And then he started mixing things up. But the way that he managed that final 5 overs, which, proved to be the key ones, absolutely perfect. I mean, you could, if you're going to be harsh, you could say he had to bring Bumrah on. That was the only card that he had to play. But I think he went back to Hardik and he trusted Hardik to bowl key overs. And he brought Arshdeep on. I'm sure in the plan, Arshdeep probably was going to bowl that last over. But he said, no, we're going to try and, win it or put a lot of pressure on right now in the 16th over or in the 19th over. And he brought that on, and it meant that Hardik only had 16 to defend. So, I think they've done a fantastic job. And, Binksy, I'll throw it back to you because we mentioned this, before the show, and you also said it in your intro. What do you make of this? I think the lazy narrative probably from this game is going to be around South Africa choking. I think that, obviously the fact that they got it down to 30 off 30 and they've been in these situations many times before and haven't been able to get across the line. Where do you stand on South Africa's performance in this game and where they sit with all of that kind of narrative?
Yeah, look, I think, it's easy, I think, to go down that route. I actually want to go down the route of T20 changes so quickly, the way that the modern game is played. We talked about it earlier on. You don't just try and get over the line with, 24 singles like you would have done, probably in the 1992 White Ball World Cup, for example, when, we were really introduced, I suppose, to watching these big tournaments on TV. So I think we've got to give a massive amount of credit to the way that India wrestled themselves back into the game. Probably from over 16 through to 20. A couple of outstanding pieces of fielding, some outstanding pieces of bowling, some brilliant captaincy. And ultimately, a guy in, Jasprit Bumrah doing the equivalent of what Heinrich Klaasen had done in the 2 overs before. Klaasen's gone and hit, 16, 18, 20 from an over a couple of times. Bumrah's come in and done the bowling equivalent of that. And he's done it all the way through the tournament. His economy rate for this tournament, I think, is somewhere around 4.5, which is the lowest ever economy rate in a T20 tournament. When run rates are typically going up, to have, what is it, probably the, 10th or 11th edition of this tournament, to have a seam bowler who bowls in the power play and who bowls at the death, going for certainly under 5, if not under 4.5 and over across the course of a tournament, is just absolutely phenomenal. So I'm sure that, South Africa will be hurting from this, and I'm sure there'll be some press around that that C word. But I think you've actually just got to give the credit to India in this instance. But Baldy, can I throw to you? We've talked a little bit about Virat Kohli and Rohit Sharma. There's another great Indian batsman who bows out of this game as well with I'm sure he gets a T20 World Cup winners medal, and that's the coach, Rahul Dravid. Thoughts on, I guess, those three and their impact on not only this tournament, but Indian cricket as well, Michael?
It's been an incredible career for all three of those gentlemen. And for them to be able to sign off, I mean, not many people get to write their own narrative. Not many people, as we've said a number of times on this podcast, get to write their own fairy tale finish. I mean, lots try, and lots been said over the last 12 months about some people that live close to where I live that have tried to do that very thing. But now we've actually seen three of the class people in Indian cricket over the last 20 years wrap up a journey that has taken India a long time to get back to the pinnacle of this great game. And they've done it with class. They've done it with a tremendous amount of style. This caps off a really incredible 24 months for India in terms of their cricketing journey. And I'm honestly, when India won that tournament, as much as I felt for South Africa, I was joyful for India, and just the amount of emotion that they showed. Hardik was in tears. You could see what it meant to Rohit. You could see what it meant to Kohli. You could see what it meant to all of those players. And for Rohit and for Virat to go out in that way is a perfect fairy tale ending for them. And I'm so happy that they were able to finally break the shackles and win a major tournament, because now India will be poised to repeat again and again and again. And we could be looking at a future dynasty in cricket that started with those guys and continues on with the next generation of Jaswal and Dubey and co. It's an exciting future for Indian cricket, and I'm so glad that they were able to sign off with a win.
It was awesome, wasn't it? I mean, you even saw tears fell from the sky, right? While they were all celebrating, the sky, it started raining, and I think Rohit went off by himself for a minute, didn't he? The whole team was there celebrating, and he just kind of walked off. Unfortunately for him, the cameras followed him and were in his face the whole time, but you could see, he was really sucking in that, soaking in that moment. And I'm fascinated actually to see what happens to those two guys' careers, because, they've only, I think, to this point at least, said that'll be the last of them in T20, in the T20I format. Kohli's aftermatch, he talked about, which is pretty cool, I thought, talking about, it's time for the next generation to come in and lead that team and all the exciting young players that they have. So I thought that was very, very cool that happened. So, I hope it means we still get to see a lot of both of them in the test game. And, I'm just now fascinated to see what else they do. I'm sure in the Champions Trophy, they'll be, if they're still in that, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with in that. And whether it means if they bow out of T20s, could we see Virat at the 2027 ODI World Cup? You wouldn't put it past them the way that both of those two guys are actually still hitting the ball at the moment, even though at times they struggled during that tournament. You kind of saw once it got down to the business end how important both of those guys can be to that squad. So, very, very cool sort of moment in that fairy tale style, as you said, Baldy.
Well, boys, I think that probably wraps up our initial views on this World Cup final victory by India over South Africa. We are going to have something exciting for us, which is some red ball cricket coming up to talk about as well. We've got Jimmy Anderson's farewell test in a week or so's time. We'll be back in your feed probably on Tuesday or Wednesday with a little bit of a review of this T20 World Cup in its entirety. We'll also most likely look forward to that English red ball summer on that episode. But for now, we can end by saying it's T20 Men's World Cup champions of 2024 in the USA and the Caribbean are India. Commiserations to South Africa in what was a thrilling final. But we will be back to talk about the tournament in its entirety a little later in the week. But for now, it is good night and good bless from us all here in Auckland. We'll see you soon. Good night.